I'm Andrée, the other half of Davis White, that's Adam and I. And I've got a bit of a two-handed clicker thing here, so I hope I stay in sync. So this is Adam and I in our wild garden that we did at Hampton Court House a couple of years ago, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later. But mostly I'm going to talk about the process we go through when we design and engage with communities to make sure, as far as we can, we design places that are welcoming and accessible to everybody. So these are some of the things that, I'm going to give you some pointers to some of the things I consider when I'm designing. So this is a project we did for Southampton City Council about 2 years ago. This was an existing space, underused, difficult for the local authority to maintain. It's a paddling pool of those kind of old school bodies of water that's left available for people to play with at one time. Open access, now they have to have a lifeguard there when people are playing, so of course the time that it could be used for was reducing and reducing, so it was open for about a month or two each year. So our brief was to bring something that meant it was easier for them to look after, was open for a greater period of the year, and was really going to appeal to the local communities. So the way we start when we are commissioned with a new project is to really get to know the stakeholders in the community. So those people that we are designing for, that's what we want to get under the skin of. So we often start with these open meetings where we invite all stakeholders, the local police, nursery managers, really anybody who's got an interest in the development. And we invite questions and comments, nothing too big or too small. We just want to know, get the mood of the community and see what their expectations are. We also kind of outline our vision and where we stand and what our what we as designers want to try and achieve, and we introduce our sort of context and sort of help kind of raise the aspirations of the community as well, because when you have a conversation, it can be a little bit prosaic about things that dogs and bins and toilets and that sort of thing. So we like to kind of raise the aspiration a little bit by talking about the work we do. Our business could not survive unless we had post-it notes, and this is how we collect information. We just, as we're having this conversation, we randomly record everything as much as we possibly can and collect it so that we can, go back and make sure we've, really understood what people want. Schools, of course, fantastic place to start when you're engaging with a community. They're very, in our experience, enthusiastic about having professionals in the school. Sometimes they leave you to it, the teachers disappear, and Adam and I have spent many an afternoon with 30 kids wondering when anyone's going to come and relieve us. But it's just brilliant having conversations with children about play. And we talk not about swings and slides and things that make up a playground. We talk about the play experiences, what they like to do, where they like to go outside, who their friends are, what they do in their spare time, free time if they have any. We get groups to make models of their kind of ideal place that they'd like to visit, they'd like to play in, and then we get them describing their sort of aspirations for a new place to play. So, so we spend an hour or two doing these things. The outcomes are many and varied, but kids, it's quite interesting, really get the idea of what a place is as opposed to a swing and a slide. They really start to understand place making, and very gladdening for me, they talk a lot about nature, so that's really quite interesting. But again, it's important to work with as many different sorts of groups as you can, and is sort of practical within the constraints of a sort of commissioned piece of work. This was a special educational needs school in Southampton called Cedar School, and these are kids who are permanently in wheelchairs, so they tend to have a stronger connection to their non-physical abilities. So they talk a lot about scent, taste, sound and colour, so all those things that are more connected to their everyday life. So all of these fairly kind of abstract ideas help us to start getting what we would describe as a mood board. So the kind of atmosphere of the new development, what we think the local community are asking for, also what we think is appropriate, our response to the site, and all this helps to sort of direct the development. Hang on, I'm doing a bit of a left hand and right hand. Okay, no, it's okay. But also us as designers, our response to the site. So we will look at large scale, wider setting, where car parks are, where the toilets are, where paths to sites are, all important things to make a place accessible. So we look at zoning, circulation, what sort of play offer might be appropriate. But then we start to draw up a design, looking in a bit more detail at how the site's going to be used and developed, and responding to some of the things that have come out of our engagement process. So for example, on Southampton Common, we talked a lot about nature, being up high, flying, being a bird, making nests. So this is some of our development ideas of how we could respond to those things. And really, when we start to broaden out our engagement with the wider community to find out what sort of things they want, we find it best if you, by then, start to get some ideas together about what you're offering. People find it a bit difficult to comment in abstract. You can go too early to the wider community, which is kind of what I'm saying. People want to know, what are you going to put where? How many trees are there going to be? Will there be enough seats? All those kind of things. So you do need to have gone some way down the design process before broadening out to the wider community. So we do lots of these sort of pre-organised events, piggybacking on sort of, fun run days or village fairs or anything where we find people are already going to be there. And if you can set up on the site you're working on and developing, so much the better. It's great to be there in person. Actually, there's an engagement event happening today on a project we're doing for Runnymede. So this is exactly what's happening there. And what I'm saying is it's brilliant if you can be there to hear firsthand from the community. Because there's nothing like talking to as many people as you can to understand the kind of detail and local stories. Then we always go back to the stakeholder group to make sure what we're developing is manageable and maintainable by the stakeholders. And then you from there we develop a design that we feel is going to respond to the needs of the site, the community, and what the stakeholder group can look after. And this is nearing completion, that project. So one of the things that came out of this working with Cedar School, with Special Education and Needs School, is that one of them would love the idea of a roller coaster. So this experience of kind of whizzing around and going up and down. So we interpreted that using this kind of network of paths that we put in that were made of concrete, but they were textured. They had different levels and different surfaces. So as you go around in a wheelchair, you can get the sense of going up and down, zooming around and going over. So these, I'm just going to run through as well some of the details. When you're thinking about inclusion and accessibility, there are some fairly obvious ways of just making sure that you're really appealing to all members of the community. So we use a lot of sand, which is often, you need to be able to get in and out of these sandpit areas that we create. So we do that by making ramped edges. The sort of range of play experiences that you offer. Play tends to be focused on sort of noisy, challenging places, but quiet, little intimate spaces are very important as well. We use these hollow logs a lot for doing that. Some more sort of obvious things like making slides wide enough for kids to go down together, so if you've got a nervous child, they can be helped by an adult or a friend. When we do make these kind of big challenging structures, we're always thinking about different ages, so we never design for a particular age group. We try and make things appeal to everybody, from very young to adults, grannies, anybody, everyone's welcome. but we'll make an adaptation. So for these climbing trees, which we use quite a lot, we put in a sort of low-level hand grip so that small kids can traverse around the bottom of them, and then more able kids can kind of get right up to the top. Places to just hang out. You know, it's very important that play is a very social thing. You know, these nature play spaces are a brilliant place for kids just to get together and meet their friends in a relatively safe environment. So we put all the seating in, and the senior members of society always reminding us that they need seats with backrests as well. So an important consideration. I think we've talked a little bit about the value of free play. So again, this is where, as a designer, you kind of add things that your community is not really telling you. You know, you can suggest these things that they wouldn't necessarily ask for. But you know, for us, this thing about making play a place that is about the child's imagination and sparking their imagination is really important. In Southampton, we did that. We made a series of swales, ditches that basically pick up rainwater and surface water runoff. And you could see kids basically spend hours and hours and hours just dragging logs from the woodland and making dams and things. Same sort of idea with den building, this idea of being cooperative and testing your building skills. This is a little project that we did in North Wales. It's a really small, low-budget project, but it's just such a lovely example of what you can do just by slightly kind of sort of tweaking the natural environment. It hasn't always got to be about big budget play spaces. So here and this is also a really good way of engaging older kids. So they actually built some of the interventions in the woodland. So we worked with Nick, our forest craft expert, who did a drop-in workshop to build a bridge. So kids were invited on a Saturday to turn up at 2 o'clock, and the magic would unfold. So they started chopping logs up, using sort of traditional tools to split timber and think about ways of getting over a stream. Using traditional tools here to split wood, and spent the day working in a wood, building a bridge.
So was that part of that project?
This is in North Wales, different site, yeah. But it's the kind of thing that we have done on sites in all sorts of places. This idea of putting one element of the site, putting it aside for a sort of community event when you open. We're just doing a project in Guildford at the moment. We're doing the same sort of things. We've got an opening event, and the kids are going to be making elements of the play space that can kind of be added onto it. So finally, there's Adam and his team standing nearly dark when they finally finished making this bridge. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our wild garden. This was a show garden we did in 2017. And this was all about mental health, really. So there's a lot of pointers to how you deal with physical inclusion and accessibility in play. But we were commissioned to work with a charity that helps children who are on the autism spectrum. So this was all about focusing on mental health rather than physical health. So really this was all about how being out in nature is good for your mental health. This thing we all know about, vitamin N, and this was really the concept behind the wild garden. How would you create a playful environment that is based on nature, is plant-based, and how is that going to help these children with autism? So there's a lot of research around plant-based environments, how they are good for reducing stress, they improve social interaction, reduce attention deficit disorder, so all kinds of benefits to making a heavily planted play environment. So we started to develop this idea of playful planting, and what did that mean in detail? So we looked at how it sort of increased the diversity of play and learning opportunities. I haven't got my glasses on, so I can't see. You can probably read those things better than me. Yeah, increasing the opportunity for learning about nature, offering sensory experiences, and all the other things that play environments do. And to kind of broaden out our thinking about this, we worked with our friend Emma Desmier, who's an aromatic and sensory scientist. So we ran these sort of scratch and sniff workshops to encourage kids to really try and get them interested in plants. So plants, you know, for some members of society and kids, they're a bit, it's a sort of the green fuzz outside, and to actually get people interested in plants in detail can be a bit of a challenge. So we decided to do it through this idea of scent, and scent has such a strong link with memory. It's really good for kids, but it's also good for dementia sufferers, for example, and children love the sort of familiar scents like rosemary or things like mint because it reminds them of toothpaste, chives, for example, they smell of cooking. And we also discovered plants that smell of Coca-Cola. There's a pelargonium called cola bottles, which smells like Coca-Cola. Peanut butter, I don't know if you know the plant Melianthus, it's got a really strong peanut smell. So, you know, those were all sorts of things that gradually we sort of discovered and thought, you know, how can we introduce this whole layer of aromatic plants into children? So we've kind of started to develop a few ideas about how to use plants in a play environment, and these are some of the things to consider because, you know, they've got to be relatively robust to withstand a bit of trampling. With autism, some children can get too overstimulated if you use a lot of colour. So in this instance, we really concentrated on a green colour palette, which is much more soothing and focused on texture rather than colour. You know, places to let the grass grow long, encourage kids to pick the plants, and those sorts of things. So this was really the kind of background or the setting for this garden that we designed. It was a show garden, which is you know, one of the great things about doing a show garden is you can sort of test out some of your ideas. Clients are a little bit more open to experimentation because it's a temporary thing. But it was all, so we wanted to see what a heavily planted play environment could look like and how it would benefit children with autism. So this was an early design, our concept designs. We looked at play value a lot, which is, you know, the kind of traditional route we would normally go down. We did the same kind of things, going through these workshops, getting the kids to think about place and play and being outside. So even that was quite an interesting exercise actually, because there are kids who are, you know, full on, really loud, love all kinds of sensory stimulation, would build a model with colours and textures and full of things. And then there were other children who were quite happy to have just a very flat, plain, green area with one tree in it, because they feel, you know, they didn't want to be overwhelmed with too much information. So even at that stage you can start to see you know, how this spectral disorder kind of manifests itself. And we worked with their clinical psychologist as well, Julie Crocombe, who really helped us to understand you know, what was appropriate and how you know, the how autistic children respond to place. So one of the things about it being spectrum disorder is this thing that you can have too much sensory information, and in other situations kids like a lot of sensory information. So the design starts with this sort of open, relaxing space, and as you go through, it gets busier and busier as you travel through the space. So you can see this here a little bit. We started off with these great big slabs of stone, and then as you go through the garden, it gets the paving pattern gets busier and busier with all these sort of cracks and interesting things going on. So that's the final design image we came up with. So then we started working with a nursery to think about the planting and what plants were available, were easily available. So we were looking for things that designers or schools or nurseries could access easily. So we wanted plants that were relatively easily available. So this is us working with Palmstead nurseries. We sort of selected things that we thought would be appropriate, shoved them all in the back of Adam's car, took them back home, so we could kind of test out some plant combinations, some of the aromatic qualities, how those would sort of mix and match together. And then jumping to us building on site. So here's me kind of sharing my vision for the planting with our amazing volunteers who helped us to build this show garden. And it's a fantastic image of the kind of amount of work that goes into creating something like a show garden. So, ta-da, there it is. As easy as that. The finished garden. But as you can see, it's playful. It's designed for kids with, the focus was on mental health, and it's full of plants. I mean, they were the kind of stars. And this, for me, is what was so great about doing a show garden, because that's so hard to do in the public realm, to kind of fill places with plants. Clients are very nervous about how complicated it is to look after them, and how much it's going to cost. Well, that's a whole kind of other conversation. The garden won gold medal, best in show and people's choice for us, so it's hugely successful, really well received. And the number of people we talked to that week, actually, which was another fantastic way of getting feedback on what people felt about this garden and how they had enjoyed it. So in terms of the planting and the kind of plants we selected, we starting off with the trees. We use trees with a lot of personality, like this weeping beech. So this has got branches that come right down to ground level. So it makes a sort of natural den space inside. And it doesn't look like a horticulturally bred tree. It had kind of wonky branches, and that would encourage you to get inside and maybe climb the tree. We were using a mainly green colour palette for its sort of calming scents, with lots of different textures. So one of the ideas with doing this is to help children to kind of slow down and focus on the detail of things, because their attention these days, things come at them really, really fast and furious. So we were thinking of how can you get a child to slow down, look at things in detail. So we thought if we had lots of different shaped leaves, we could take children around the garden, pick the different leaf shapes, and get them to draw around them or press them, and really start to look at plants and planting in more detail. We use some edible planting as well, which is great for kids to understand the thing of where food comes from and that whole other sense. When you're using edible plants for children, you really need to put them in a defined place, because you can't encourage children to go out into a garden or a space and say you can pick things and eat them, because it's not, you can't pick everything and eat everything. So if you have a defined space, like you might have a centre of the garden which is an edible bed or something like that, that's quite a good way of doing it. Familiar scents, lavender, pine, mint, lots of things that children kind of are familiar with. And we got some of the essential oils that we were using in the garden, like cedar, for example. We had this amazing cedar log that smelled fantastic. Now you can get cedar essential oils, and we did a lot of work around generating the smell of a woodland and how those scents are really good for you. So that was something else we put in the garden. So some of the other more playful offers, more sort of traditional playful offers in this garden, included things like this amazingly 4 or 5 ton spinning stone. So for a child, it gave them the feeling of incredible power that they could move this stone around. And this sensation of turning is something that autistic children, this emotion that autistic children find quite comforting. Things like trampolines, these ground-up trampolines, fantastic for all abilities, really good for kids who are in wheelchairs. You can see the setting is all about the plants. So in this show garden, actually, this was the one thing we couldn't get Monty on off the week we were there. He was back and forth playing on this trampoline. And again, this being about a range of experiences in a space, so something that's challenging and fun and where you can play with your friends together, but also somewhere quiet and somewhere sort of calming where you might want to sit for a few minutes if you get a little bit, it's all going a bit crazy for you. So these, we put in these stone boulder chairs. This water, of course, fantastic, soothing, calming, playful thing to have water and sand together, you know, a huge number of play opportunities. So we do try and use a lot of water in our spaces. We're currently creating another woodland stream, but Adam may have mentioned that this morning, another project. But sand and water together, yeah, fantastic play opportunities, and very calming to have water in the garden for children with mental health issues. We had high nests in this garden, accessed by ramps, but also these talking tubes. So a lot of work around inclusion is just about being able, everybody playing in the same place. So if you are physically challenged and you can't climb high, this is quite a good way of still being able to go to the same place, talk to your friends, and feel part of the same game, even if you can't climb up to a high level. And these are some of the many visitors who came to see the garden that year. I really, you know, it's very interesting to hear about their experiences of autism, dementia, other kind of mental health conditions. But, you know, without fail, everybody who walked through that garden felt, you know, stress releasing, their heart rate went down, they went in feeling grumpy, they came out feeling relaxed and happy. So that, you know, that is the power of working in a well-planted environment. So this is published information that Adam and I did, which is available actually with our sort of tips on using plants and children, planting with children together, and particularly for children with the autism spectrum. So I'm just going to finish with a few slides of Southampton. This is the Southampton project when it opened. And I think really my message with designing for everybody is know who you're designing for. You know, it's really important to get to know your community. And when you work with a private client, you know, that's quite a straightforward process. But when you're working in the public realm, that, you know, your client is, you know, very wide, very varied. But we try as much as we can to engage with as many different groups as we can to really try and make sure these spaces include something for everybody. And I think, yeah, there we go. Yes.
We've got 3 questions.